Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. A reminder that, we don't stick to sports around here. We're going to be doing a lot of sports here into 2021 as the Ravens enter an off season now with lots of question marks. Usually, Luke and I would be putting the suitcases together and the suntan lotion that we don't use because we sit inside all week anyway at convention centers. But for the first time in 27 years, I am not going to be broadcasting for Super Bowl. Is it 55? Is that what number? I have to get my numbers right here, Luke, but I think 55. Either way, Tom Brady might be there or Aaron Rodgers. One of those two will be there, and certainly either Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes and or Chad Henne will be there when it's all over with. Let's go back to Buffalo on Saturday night. You had a mouthful about Lamar Jackson and the future and money and contracts and what they're going to do and a wide receiver. And, not that I want to refute the fact that they could use a better wide receiver. I didn't get a chance to even go back at you on this, but okay, so if they had Stephon Diggs all year, what would they have done with him? I mean, I saw Antonio Brown running around with Tom Brady the other night. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins, who was available. If that premier person were there, and they had cap room, which is another issue, as well on top of all this, but if they did, what does that even look like in the offense? Because for me, the more I think about it, they don't really want that receiver. They may think they want that receiver. Then they bring that receiver in, and that receiver is not going to be a part of what they want to do on first down.
Yeah, well, then I would question why have you been so bad in the postseason then? Why in games where teams have done a good job against your running game, what's your backup plan then? Are you just going to throw your hands up and say, well, oh well? And you're not the only one to pose that question. And look, I made it very clear. I don't think a Stephon Diggs, a DeAndre Hopkins, that type of player is going to lead the league in receptions if they're with the Ravens. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying they should lead the league in receptions if they join the Ravens. But I just, if you're telling me this is all this offense is ever going to be from a passing standpoint, then no, I don't believe they're going to win a Super Bowl with this offense. And it's not even Lamar Jackson as much as it's the entire thing. But I think they can get better throwing the ball. For one thing, as you just mentioned, they don't throw the ball a whole lot on first down. Guess what their success rate was throwing the ball on first down? It was pretty good. Warren Sharp and some of the analytics sites that are out there, they had a pretty nice success rate throwing the ball on first down. They don't do it a whole lot, but maybe that's something they need to look at. And because the analytics tell you that across the board, almost the entire league runs the ball way too much on first down rather than taking advantage of base defenses and heavier personnel packages and throwing the ball on first down and get in a position where you throw it on first down and you pick up 7-8 yards and then run it on 2nd and 2, or you throw an incomplete pass. Well, don't run it on 2nd and 10, throw on 2nd and 10. It's really, it sounds backwards, counterintuitive to how we've always thought about football, but the numbers don't lie. So I hear what you're saying there. And again, that question's been posed by a lot of people. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I know that, if you're talking Stephon Diggs or DeAndre Hopkins, or if they go out and sign Allen Robinson, that's going to be a 100-catch, 1,300-yard receiver. But I do know this. After the 2009 season, when the Ravens went to Indianapolis, and I know Joe Flacco wasn't healthy, but they scored 3 points. Well, what did they do that offseason? They went out and got Anquan Boldin. Anquan Boldin didn't catch 100 balls and have 1,400 yards and have 15 touchdown passes, but we saw a difference, right? It helped take Joe Flacco to another level, especially when you talk about January needing that go-to guy. So I'm not saying the receiver is the end-all, be-all. As I mentioned in our previous discussion, this is an across-the-board thing. I mean, the offensive line, I do think the play calling and the route concepts they have. I do think wide receiver, and yes, I do think Lamar Jackson can improve and needs to improve as a passer. I think Lamar Jackson would be the first to tell you that he can get better and wants to get better in that way. So, but if you're looking at something that, let's face it, has been one of the few legitimate, real flaws you can talk about with this organization, it has been the wide receiver position, whether it's not being able to draft them, whether it's not bringing them in at the proper time, whether it's, as I mentioned Anquan Boldin a minute ago, getting rid of a receiver at the wrong time. So, that is something that I look to. And again, go back and look at Josh Allen in 2019. I mean, the Ravens, there's a great example of it. They blitzed the heck out of him last December of 2019, when they went up to Buffalo. They absolutely blitzed him, and he was completely overwhelmed. And he was a guy that was, I don't want to say along for the ride, but he certainly wasn't driving the engine of that Bills team last year getting to the postseason. They played good defense and they ran the ball, and he was part of that as well. He make a play every now and then, but he looked closer to being a disappointment as a first round pick compared to what he became this year. Now, again, that wasn't all Stephon Diggs. I'm not suggesting that a number one receiver just shows up. The Ravens acquire a guy and they plug him in, and that you don't make any other improvements or any other tweaks. I'm not saying that alone fixes this passing game or makes this passing game that much better. But I do look at this group of wide receivers, and especially this year, where last year they were much more tight end centric. And of course they trade Hayden Hurst and then Nick Boyle goes down. But they were much more 12 personnel a year ago. One running back, two tight ends. This year they were much more 11 personnel. Well, if you're going to have three wide receivers on the field, do you really have three wide receivers on the field that frequently that you feel that good about? Marquise Brown, yes. Beyond that,
well, Duvernay, they don't
I
get
love
on the field, right? I mean, he had no snaps the other night, so.
He played, I think, 2 snaps. The official game book had him as 2 offensive snaps. I mean, not that either you or I were drinking the purple Kool-Aid as it relates to Dez Bryant, but he was a total non-factor. And look, I wasn't expecting him to be much because he'd been out of the league for a couple years. But when you're talking about having Marquise Brown, I love Willie Snead, the guy. I think he's a solid locker room glue guy. I think he's a guy that, as a very complimentary player, will make a catch for you every now and then and will block. But is he a guy that you want to be featuring as one of your starting receivers? Not really. Not at this stage. New Orleans was done with him a couple years ago. And then,
by the way, the big trust era is over too, right? I mean,
sure,
we're never going to see Mark Ingram again, Willie Snead. I mean, we can start to go through these names of veteran players to say, are they back or are they not back, and will they or won't they? And this team's going to have some turnover. I don't think there's any doubt about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it happens every year. But, especially when you talk about a team that they're not they're not up against the cap, but they don't have a whole lot of cap room. And that's in flux right now because we don't know what the cap number is going to look like with the league, and obviously revenue being down with so little fan attendance around the league.
And they've given a lot of money to Stanley and to Humphrey.
Sure, exactly. And they know they're going to be giving money to, at the very least, Lamar Jackson. You would assume Mark Andrews, Orlando Brown, we'll see. I mean, there are a lot of questions, and we haven't even talked about the defensive side of the ball, the free agents they have there, and what that means. I mean, this is a team, of their 6 edge rushers, their 6 outside linebackers, the only one under contract is Jalen Ferguson. Yannick Ngakoue, free agent. Matthew Judon, free agent. Pernell McPhee, who played really well down the stretch, free agent. Jihad Ward, free agent. Tyus Bowser, free agent. So you're not going to bring all those guys back. In fact, at this point, I'm wondering if you're going to be able to bring back more than 1 or 2. And that's not necessarily saying Judon and Ngakoue. I definitely not expecting them to bring back both of those guys. The question is are they going to bring back one of those guys? So, as you mentioned, Mark Ingram's going to be a cap casualty. No big surprise there. In fact, I had to chuckle a little bit at some of the national dialogue with, people talking about it. That's a salary cap move. No, it's not. He's their number 4 option in the running game at this point because you have Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards all better than him in that way. And Ingram doesn't play special teams like Justice Hill does. So that was, the salary cap thing is phooey. He didn't have a place on game day.
Well, it's like he wasn't even on the team this year.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to be disparaging of Mark Ingram, but he wasn't as good as those guys this year. I mean,
it's amazing because he was kind of the heart and soul of the engine. You talk about Willie Snead and a leadership standpoint and why they brought Calais Campbell in and what Earl Thomas obviously lacked. And I think what Marlon Humphrey lacks, quite frankly. You know what I mean? I don't know that Ronnie Stanley's the locker room guy or Marlon Humphrey, but that veteran, that thing. You talk about Pernell McPhee coming back. That, he's got a personality in that room and having been around and won and whatnot. Those are the kind of people that they bring, human beings. Mark Ingram's the kind of human being they bring in here. They're going to be in search of that, I think, in the offseason as much as anything. Not just a wide receiver, but some leadership pieces that they seem to import around here.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think you can make an argument there. I mean, they love Mark Ingram, the person. He's 31. I mean, Pernell McPhee, can you bring him back another year? Sure, but he's into his 30s now. Calais Campbell's under contract. What's he going to look like next year? What's Brandon Williams going to look like next year? I mean, you're talking about older players. So, as much as we've been dwelling on the offense because, well, when you score 3 points in a playoff loss, yeah, you're going to talk about the offense, and the defense was they had overall an incredible performance on Saturday night. They really played their butts off doing what they did against that Bills offense that had just they've been wrecking teams just like the Ravens were down the stretch. So really impressive in that way, but they've got some questions there. And even look at I mean, they bring back Jimmy Smith on a 1-year deal. It's a minimal, it's not a big salary, but do you feel good about him and Tavon Young as depth? They restructured Tavon Young's deal not terribly long ago, so he presumably will be back. But what's he going to look like after another knee injury? So, they definitely, believe me, they're not in a position anything like the New Orleans Saints, for example, who Drew Brees is going to be walking off into the sunset, and I think they're $90 million over the cap. I mean, we're not talking about anything like that. I mean, the Ravens will have some flexibility, but it's not a whole lot when you consider the list of free agents they have. And okay, yeah, you jettison Mark Ingram. That's only saving you, that's a few $1,000,000 in savings. It's not something that's moving the meter dramatically. So it will be interesting to see how Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh imagine this roster for 2021, knowing that you've already paid a couple guys and there's more of that coming. And I think one of the more fascinating ones might be Orlando Brown. I mean, think about it. You've already given Ronnie Stanley this 9-figure contract. And, Stanley talked over the weekend, I think he tweeted out that he's walking on his own, and they expect him to be back at some point in the spring. He should be, I would assume, full go for training camp. So I don't have any reason to believe there's a long-term concern there. But can you afford to give Orlando Brown Jr. a big contract like you did Ronnie Stanley? Can you pay both of your tackles? I'm guessing probably not. So,
well, they didn't want to do that when they gave Ricky Wagner away, and I'm watching Ryan Jensen playing a champ. They had other linemen.
Yeah,
they
you
picked
can't
who
pay
they
everyone.
liked, right?
Yeah. Kelechi Osemele is a great example there. I mean,
made a lot of money somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and played well at least at times when injuries didn't catch up with him. At times elsewhere. But Orlando Brown he's going to be going into a contract year. I'm not suggesting you do it, but if you are a team looking at trying to manage your assets and understanding where you are right now with the cap, where you're going to be the next couple years with the cap, knowing that you're going to lose Orlando Brown, at least there's a pretty good chance you would think you're going to lose him. Do you listen to a team that saw what he did at left tackle this year in place of Ronnie Stanley and is desperate for a left tackle? If some team gives you a really high draft pick, do you entertain that? Now, the critic would reply to that and say, well, they were already having issues with their interior line. So, Luke, you want to trade the right tackle? I'm not suggesting they do it.
Well, they're going to draft, 26th, 25th, wherever it's going to be, right?
27th.
27th.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, at that point, they might get the best center in the draft. They'll
Maybe,
get the fourth best wide receiver, whatever that thing's going to be for them.
Sure.
We're used to drafting like this. But if this is where you find a center, I mean, dude, until they get the center thing right,
yeah.
that on a cold night in Buffalo, the center situation cost them as much as anything. And I think psychologically, not knowing what they're getting there, not good.
No, not at all. And look, you and I both have an affinity for Matt Skura. He lost his job because he couldn't snap anymore. Now, was he playing great as a blocker? No. But he lost his job because he couldn't snap anymore. And to see Patrick McCary have very similar issues, if not worse, when you consider your quarterback, we haven't even mentioned it, the quarterback got concussed because of your bad snap and what happened on the final play of the third quarter. So it is really one of those things that is so ridiculous to have to even discuss because you're talking about an offense that is in shotgun or pistol, I think 98% of the time. I mean, except for the rarest short yardage situations, they're always in shotgun or pistol. So
put Morgan Cox in there.
I mean, right. I mean, do you put Patrick McCary in some kind of a snap offseason program? The one name that you do throw out there, because we saw him start in place of McCary and do a pretty nice job. Tristan Colon Castillo, who undrafted rookie free agent, but we saw him start the Thanksgiving game, the Thanksgiving makeup game, because Skura and McCary were both on the COVID list. Colon Castillo did a nice job, and he also started late in the season when McCary's back had flared up. So, is he your guy? Well, I want to see him snap, right? I mean, it's silly. It reminds you of like Chuck Knobloch, Steve Sachs, like not being able to throw the ball, from second base to first base. It's something so simplistic, but you're right. I mean, as much as we want to criticize Lamar Jackson or J.K. Dobbins dropping a couple passes or Greg Roman's play calling or all these other things that you could pick apart from Saturday night, one of the most basic acts that a football team is going to have, your center being able to snap the football, that was a major failure on Saturday night. So, yeah, it is one of those things that, you felt like they had it remedied, right? Because, I mean, McCary had an issue here or there, but, for the most part, had certainly been more consistent than Skura snapping. Now you have that happen, and he talked on Sunday afternoon. He took accountability, although, he mentioned, and this is another thing that isn't just a Patrick McCary thing, but, kind of the offense in general, and talking about being rattled or making mistakes or, just doing things that you kind of scratch your head about. He pointed out, he talked about the crowd noise being a factor. Look, I love the Bills fan base. I mean, look at what they've done with donating to Lamar Jackson's favorite charity after Lamar gets concussed. I mean, that is an organization that's very easy to root for. I'll be rooting for them against Kansas City. But you're telling me that your offense and your center was that rattled by what? 5,800, 6,000 fans, whatever they had in Orchard Park on Saturday night? Really? And you're trying, and you're going to tell me that's a team with championship medal if they're flustered by 6,000 fans? And I get it, it's a different year, and I know they didn't play in front of fans a whole lot, but it wasn't 65,000. So it is one of those things that, as much as we'll talk about the passing game and Lamar and a wide receiver and all these other different positions, the simplicity of, you need a center who can snap the ball and it's not going to be an issue for you, and it's not going to be something you're having to deliberately think about every play. Yeah, that should rank up there pretty highly. Now, I'm not going to –
I would have no problem right now saying if 90 days from now they draft a center with the 27th pick from wherever the hell centers come from, Michigan, Alabama, whatever they're going to do, if they pick the best center in the draft, somewhere early.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to reach,
who's going to be a solution.
Sure.
Solution center for my $500 million quarterback, yes. And by the way, you mentioned getting guys hurt. James Hurst was running around at left tackle for the Saints the other night, so yes.
Correct. So, I mean, it's important. And as much as – and look, our previous segment, I spent 20 minutes talking about a wide receiver, talking about pass catchers. Yeah, the offensive line was a failure on Saturday night. Lamar Jackson throws the pick six. Go back and watch the previous play. Marquise Brown is wide open. You know why Lamar Jackson can't hit him for an easy touchdown to tie the game late in the third quarter? It's because between the slide protection that they called with Tyree Phillips shifting to the left as the right tackle, between that and then J.K. Dobbins completely whiffing. And again, I don't know what happened there, and you're probably not going to get an on-the-record answer there as far as what happened. And clearly the post-game press conference with John Harbaugh, that wasn't a specific play that's going to come up necessarily, but that's an absolute breakdown there when Jerry Hughes then can come in and pressure Lamar Jackson and ruin what would have been a touchdown. And then he throws a pick six the next play. So, just an utter breakdown there. And the Ravens, they had no answers for consistently handling the Buffalo blitz. I mean, Lamar didn't have the answers, and certainly the offensive line didn't have the answers. So
kind of an incredible thing, though, when you think back on this season, right, of everything that happened, all the COVID, all the awfulness, all the everything. Lamar's on the goal line in an empty Buffalo, needing to get 5 yards to tie the game, and change the destiny. And I'm eating barbecue this week in Kansas. You know what I mean? Like, as much as we'll sit here and lament how awful this is and how far away they are, and and I'll even say I don't know that they're as close to winning a championship as 14-2 last year and playing in the second week.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way. Now maybe, but I could talk myself into it. Dobbins makes the block. He hits Hollywood.
It's a tie game then, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
period. And
Sure.
And on that night, that if they had the end zone the right way and Tucker hits the kick, they can win a game and they could be playing this week. So it does feel very far off based on what happened Saturday night, but it didn't feel very far off when it was first and goal, right?
At that moment, right? I mean, it's first and you have second and goal. Again, go back to the play before that. It's right there. Marquise Brown is wide open, and even if you're someone that's down on Lamar Jackson's accuracy and you're a bigger critic of him than other people, he's going to make that play. But you have your right tackle and kind of a slide protection, doesn't block anyone, and then your rookie running back completely whiffs. Hughes coming off the edge, well, then it's incomplete, and then you have third and goal from the 9, and we know what happens next. So it really. The offensive line, we can't overstate how much of a problem that was on Saturday night. And that's where I do stick up for Lamar Jackson more so. And I will defend the passing game a little bit more because, the pass protection is part of that. It's interesting. And as I wrote at BaltimorePositive.com, kind of recapping what happened, kind of, summarizing some of the mistakes that we saw that had been mistakes earlier in the year. The overall point of my piece was the need for this passing game to kind of improve across the board. And right away, I think people imply that I mean Lamar Jackson and Lamar Jackson only, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Pass protection's part of that. The offensive line is part of the passing game. So when you say the passing game needs to get better, that's obviously a big part of it. Now, the good news is you will have Ronnie Stanley coming back, and you will have Orlando Brown Jr. shifting to the right tackle, back to the right tackle spot. As I mentioned, unless, if some team comes calling wanting to give you a first-round pick for Orlando Brown, I think you got to listen at least, right? But assuming that scenario doesn't play out, you feel great about your tackles again. And then the question is that interior offensive line. Bozeman, check. I'm totally happy with Bradley Bozeman at left guard. But center, have you seen enough from McCary? Have you seen enough from Tristan Colon Castillo? Do you put them through the ringer, in a snapping contest? I don't know. Again, that's one of those things that you can't really plan for all that much. You give those guys reps and they work on it, but again, it's like your second baseman can't throw the ball to the first base, or the catcher can't throw back to the pitcher.
I want to go back to this. I really believe Flacco kind of fell apart when Matt Burke left. And I would say that in a lot of circumstances that when the Atlanta Falcons wanted to get better, they went and gave Alex Mack money. I think center, and I could talk with Mike Flynn about this or talk with other centers and get Matt Burke on. I saw him on with Sandusky the other night. I think there's something about that position that's undervalued until snaps start going over guys' heads. And look, it happened to 2 Hall of Famers last week to eliminate the Pittsburgh Steelers on the first play of the game, right? So the fact that we're talking about it happened to Peyton Manning in a Super Bowl, right? So we talk about these football follies when that happens, but I'm not talking that. I'm talking about just protecting the quarterback, having the quarterback feel confident all the time. Joe Flacco became a better quarterback the minute Matt Burke came here. Matt Burke was worth every nickel of that money.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And this is where I alluded to it briefly, and it was such a big talking point last year, but it's also the difference of having Tyree Phillips or Ben Powers
or Marshall Yanda
at right guard compared to Marshall Yanda. Because, not that Yanda's snapping the ball. It's not like he's holding his head and saying, hey, you got it, snap it back there. Not talking about anything silly like that. But Marshall Yanda, in terms of helping a center with protection calls, what he's seeing up front. And Marshall Yanda would tell you he learned a lot of that from Matt Burke, playing with them previous years. So, it's tough replacing a Hall of Famer. How long did we talk? Now, C.J. Mosley came the year after Ray Lewis retired, and they brought in Darryl Smith, and Arthur Brown didn't work out, but they replaced Ray Lewis, relatively speaking, pretty quickly. But how long did we talk about safety in this town? And even now, it got to a point where a couple late round picks ended up being better value than giving Earl Thomas a bunch of money or giving Tony Jefferson a bunch of money. I mean, those guys got replaced by late round picks who ended up being, they're not superstars, but they're solid. But the point is, the Ravens invested a lot in the safety position for quite a few years and did not get great bang for their buck, and really until Eric Weddle came around. And Eric Weddle wasn't the guy he was in San Diego, but at least stabilized the position for them for at least the first year, first 2 years. But I think you make a great point though, in talking about Matt Burke and talking about just the importance of the center position, and then you get into the folly of you can't snap the ball. That's definitely something that I'm not sure, and I'm not going to try to sit here and act like I have studied this draft class remotely yet. I mean, I think this draft is going to be fascinating just to see how it plays out when you have what was an abbreviated college football season and you're not going to have a regular combine, what the draft even looks like. So is there going to, is there a center that would be worthy of a late first round pick? Probably not, because if there's someone that kind of feels like they could be in that point in the draft, they might end up going earlier than 27th. But yeah, I do think center. I thought Ben Powers was solid down the stretch, but I'm certainly not cemented in. I don't think the idea of him being your right guard is set in stone by any means, nor should it be. So can you upgrade one of those positions? And whether that's through the draft, whether there is a free agent value signing, someone that you think fits really well with what you do with this unique offense, we'll see. But that interior line was a major problem on Saturday night, and right tackle was a problem because, well, you don't have Ronnie Stanley. Orlando Brown did a terrific job at left tackle considering the circumstances, but that left you with Tyree Phillips or DJ Fluker at right tackle, which clearly was a downgrade from Orlando Brown. So the offensive line's absolutely something they're going to be looking at and should be, but we'll see how it plays out. But I do think the center, that center position, it's an interesting point you bring up, and I think we obviously left tackle. That's been known for years, but even some people whose opinions on offensive line play that I've come to respect over the years, analysts or different coaches around the league talking, you'll hear some arguments that center is at least close to being as important as left tackle. And the other position I've heard, with considering some of the degree of difficulty of some of the blocks and right guard. Imagine that Hall of Fame player the Ravens had there for years, and they don't have him anymore. And that was a position that had some issues. Again, maybe Ben Powers, the experience he gets and the offseason, another offseason under his belt. Keep in mind, these young linemen probably suffered more than anyone not having a normal spring and a normal training camp. We hear about offensive line play all the time in terms of that really being a position where practice reps for everyone else, is it that important? Probably not as important. Those O-linemen with the technique and the different things they have to do to develop, that was big, and not for the Ravens. I mean, for everyone, across the league. But when you're in a position where you're replacing a Hall of Famer and then you lose an All-Pro left tackle, that's where I do give Joe D'Alessandris, their offensive line coach, a lot of credit for the way he had this group playing down the stretch. Of course, that did not hold up very well on Saturday night.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. You can still find me, Nasty, at WNST.net or Ness at BaltimorePositive.com. Whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, any of those places into 2021 as Joe Biden takes over our country, and we're trying to figure all that stuff out. Luke will be trying to figure out some spring training and trying to figure out the rest of this pandemic and all of us getting our shots and all of that stuff. We're going to be mixing it up. Lots of conversations with county executives. The mayor of Baltimore is coming on this week. The speaker, the leader of the Senate is coming on this week, and Bill Ferguson as well. Ron Cassie coming on this week, and the loss of Dante Barksdale will also be in Safe Streets, where I'm going to try to chase down my friends over at Living Classrooms to talk about that. I mean, we've got tragedy. We've got eliminated football team. We've got problems in America. We're going to be covering all of that out at BaltimorePositive.com. And it's always a pleasure to hear from everybody out there listening to our great conversations as we wrap down a Ravens season, ramp up a continuation of the playoff season, and continuing to talk sports, but not forgetting what we do around here, WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.